The night my 9 sons left me alone on Christmas, I sat in a dark house surrounded by gifts that would never be opened. By midnight, I had made a decision, and by morning, their lives would never be the same again. My name is Ethan Miller. I'm 63 years old, and for most of my life, I believed I had built something unbreakable. A family of 9 sons who would always stand by me. I was wrong. I didn't grow up with money. I built everything I had with my own hands. Construction jobs in my 20s, a small contracting business in my 30s, property investments in my 40s. By the time I reached my 50s, I had built a comfortable life, big house, successful business, savings that could protect my children from the struggles I went through. But my greatest pride wasn't any of that. It was my sons. 9 boys, 9 different personalities, 9 futures I poured my life into. I paid for their schools, their colleges, their weddings. I helped them start businesses. I gave them down payments for homes. I never said no when they needed help. Not once. After their mother died 10 years ago, I became everything for them. I cooked, I listened, I guided them through life. I was father and mother at the same time, and I never complained, because I believe family always shows up for each other, especially on Christmas. Every year, Christmas was our tradition. The one day my house felt alive again. The one day I wasn't just an old man living in a quiet house. This year, I prepared the same way I always did. I decorated every room. I cooked their favorite meals. I bought gifts for every single one of them and every grandchild. I even wrapped each present myself. Just like I used to when they were little, I was excited because I thought this Christmas would be just like the others. I was wrong. They arrived late, not together, not laughing, not excited, one by one, like they were checking off an obligation. I told myself not to overthink it. They had their own lives now, their own responsibilities. But as the night went on, something felt off. They weren't really talking to me. They were talking to each other, quietly, whispering, checking their phones, avoiding eye contact. I tried to ignore it. I kept smiling, kept serving food, kept pretending everything was normal, until my oldest son finally stood up. He cleared his throat, and the room went silent. "Dad, we need to talk." Every single one of them stopped what they were doing. All eyes turned toward me, and suddenly, I knew something was wrong, something serious. I set my glass down slowly. "Okay," I said. "What's going on?" They looked at each other again. Then my second son spoke. "It's about the house and the business." My heart tightened. "What about them?" Another pause. Then the words came out. The words that shattered everything I believed about my family. "Dad, we think it's time you transfer everything to us." For a moment, I didn't understand what he meant. Transfer what? "The house, the properties, the company," my oldest son said. "You're getting older. It's better if we manage everything now." I stared at them, at all 9 of my sons, the boys I raised, the men I sacrificed everything for. "You mean, you want me to give you everything I built?" No one answered immediately. That silence told me everything I needed to know. My youngest son finally said quietly, "It's just practical, Dad. Practical." That word hit harder than anything else. I looked around the room, at the decorations I had put up, at the food I had cooked, at the gifts I had bought, at the family I thought I had. And for the first time, I felt like a stranger in my own home. "I'm not dead yet," I said slowly. "Mi oldest son Sahil." "We're not saying you are. We're just trying to plan ahead. Plan ahead. For my life, without me in it." I felt something inside me crack. Not anger. Not yet. Just disappointment. Deep, heavy disappointment. "Is this why you're all here tonight?" I asked quietly. "Not for Christmas, but for this?" No one answered. Again, that silence. That painful, honest silence. And in that moment, I realized something I had never wanted to admit. They didn't come to see me. They came for what I had. The room felt colder. The Christmas lights suddenly felt meaningless. All those years of sacrifice, of love, of giving them everything, and this is what it meant to them. I stood up slowly. "I think you should all go home," I said. They looked surprised, Dad, we're just trying to go home, I repeated. My voice wasn't loud, but it was firm. For the first time in my life, I wasn't asking them. I was telling them one by one. They gathered their things. No hugs. No Merry Christmas. No looking back. The door closed. And just like that, the house was silent. I stood there alone in the middle of the living room. 9 wrapped gifts still sitting under the tree. 9 sewn, and not one of them stayed. That night, sitting alone in that quiet house, I finally understood something I had refused to see for years. I hadn't raised a family. I had raised 9 men who only valued me for what I could give them. And that night, I made a decision. A quiet one. A final one. One that would change their lives forever. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room, staring at the Christmas tree long after the lights automatically turned off. The house felt colder than it ever had before. Not because of the weather, but because something inside me had finally gone quiet. For years, I had ignored the signs. The missed calls they didn't return. The visits that only happened when they needed something. The way every conversation somehow turned into a request. I told myself it was normal, that this was just how life worked when children grew up. But Christmas night showed me the truth I had been avoiding. I wasn't their father anymore. I was their provider, and the moment they believed I had nothing left to give, they were ready to replace me. That realization didn't make me angry. It made me clear. By the time the sun started to rise, I already knew exactly what I needed to do. The next morning, I made 3 phone calls. The first was to my lawyer. I had worked with him for years, but I had never needed anything like this before. I need to restructure everything, I told him. Immediately. There was a short pause on the other end of the line. Everything? He asked carefully. Yes, I said. Every property, every account, every share of the company. He didn't ask why. He just said, "Come to the office. We'll handle it today." The second call was to my financial advisor. By noon, we had begun moving every major asset I owned into a protected trust. A trust that only I controlled. One that no one could access without my direct permission. No shortcuts, no assumptions, no future inheritance conversations. Everything secured. The third call was the hardest. I called my business manager. "I'm stepping back from daily operations," I told him. Effective immediately. He was surprised, but supportive. I had built that company from nothing. Letting go of control wasn't easy, but I wasn't walking away. I was just making sure that no one else could take it from me. By the afternoon, everything had changed. On paper, my sons had nothing. No access, no ownership, no control. Just like they wanted. A future without me in it. That evening, my phone started ringing. The first call came from my oldest son. "Dad, what did you do?" he demanded. His voice wasn't warm. It wasn't concerned. It was panicked. I leaned back in my chair calmly. "I made sure everything is properly organized," I said. "What does that mean?" he asked. "It means," I replied slowly, "that everything I built stays under my control." Silence. Then, "Dad, that's not what we discussed." "We didn't discuss anything," I said. "You told me what you wanted. I made my decision." Within an hour, all 9 of my sons had called. Each one of them said something different. Some were angry. Some were confused. Some tried to sound respectful. But underneath it all, it was the same thing. Fear. Because for the first time in their lives, they couldn't rely on me to fix things for them. That night, my house phone rang again. This time, it was my third son. His voice was quieter than the others. "Dad, can we come talk to you?" I paused. For a moment, I thought about saying no, but then I said, "Tomorrow, in the afternoon." The next day, they all showed up, all 9 of them, just like they had on Christmas night. But this time, they weren't relaxed. They weren't confident. They weren't in control. They were nervous. I didn't invite them to sit in the dining room. I sat in the living room instead. The same place they had stood when they asked me to give them everything. I remained standing. They sat. That small difference said everything. My oldest son spoke first again. "Dad, we think there's been a misunderstanding." I didn't respond. I just looked at him, calm, silent, waiting. We weren't trying to take anything from you, he continued. We were just thinking about the future. The future where I'm not here, I asked quietly. No one answered. My second son tried next. You know we care about you, Dad. I held his gaze. Do I? I asked. The room went silent again. My youngest son looked down at the floor, and for a brief second, I saw something in his eyes. Shame. Real shame. But the others, they were still thinking about the same thing. Control. Money. Security. I gave you everything you needed to build your own lives, I said slowly. Your own careers. Your own homes. Your own families. I paused. But instead of building something of your own, you came here to take mine. No, Dad. One of them started. I raised my hand slightly, and he stopped. For years, I continued, I thought my role was to keep giving, to keep providing, to keep fixing everything. I looked at each of them one by one, but I see now that all I did was teach you to depend on me instead of respecting me. The weight of those words settled over the room. No one interrupted this time. So here's what's going to happen, I said calmly. I walked over to the table beside me, picked up a folder, and placed it down in front of them. Inside that folder was my decision, and it was one they were not prepared for. My oldest son reached for it slowly, his hands slightly shaking. What is this? He asked. I looked him straight in the eye. This is what your future looks like now. He opened the folder, and as his eyes moved across the page, the color drained from his face, because in that moment, for the first time in their lives, my sons realized something they never expected. They weren't inheriting my life anymore. They were going to have to earn their own. And that was only the beginning. The moment my oldest son finished reading the first page, his hand froze. His eyes moved across the document again, slower this time, like he was hoping the words would change if he read them twice. They didn't. What? Is this? He asked, his voice no longer confident. It's exactly what it looks like, I said calmly. He passed the folder to the others. One by one, they read the same thing. A legally binding restructuring of everything I owned, every property, every account, every part of my business, locked inside a trust that only I controlled. And more importantly, a new set of conditions. My second son looked up at me, disbelief written all over his face. You're serious about this? I've never been more serious in my life, I replied. My third son flipped to the next page. What's this section? He asked. That, I said, is the part where things change. I walked closer to them, my voice steady. If any of you expect to receive anything from me in the future, you're going to earn it. Silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. No more loans, I continued. No more emergency bailouts. No more Dad will fix it. He let that sink in. Then I added, from now on, if you want access to anything I've built, you will show me that you can stand on your own first. My oldest son shook his head. Dad, this is extreme. No, I said quietly. What you did on Christmas, that was extreme. The room went still again, because they knew I was right. My fourth son leaned forward. So, what exactly are you saying? I looked him straight in the eye. I'm saying your inheritance is no longer guaranteed. The words hit them like a shockwave. You can't do that. One of them said. I already did, I replied. Another son stood up. This is punishment. I shook my head slowly. No, this is correction. They didn't like that. I could see it in their faces. Because for the first time, they weren't in control of the situation. You're treating us like strangers, my second son said. I held his gaze. No, I said calmly. I'm treating you like men. That sentence changed the room, because deep down, they knew they hadn't been acting like men. They had been acting like entitled boys. My youngest son finally spoke again. What do we have to do? He asked quietly. All of his brothers turned to look at him, some annoyed, some surprised, but I noticed something else. He was the only one actually willing to listen. I nodded slightly. That's a good question. I reached into the folder and pulled out another page. A simple document. A list. Each of you will be responsible for building something of your own, I said. careers, investments, stability. I placed the paper on the table, and for the next 5 years, I will watch. Watch what? One of them asked. Your actions, I replied. How you treat your families, how you handle your finances, how you treat me. And if we do all that? My oldest son asked. Then, I said, I'll decide what you deserve. The word deserve made them uncomfortable, because it meant nothing was guaranteed anymore. This isn't fair, one of them muttered. I looked at him. You know what wasn't fair, I said quietly. Spending Christmas night alone in a house full of gifts, while my 9 sons walked out on me. No one spoke after that, because there was nothing to argue with. Minutes passed. Tension filled the room. Some of them looked angry. Some looked embarrassed. Some looked like they were still trying to figure out how to get control back. Finally, my oldest son stood up. So that's it? He asked. That's it, I said. He nodded slowly. Then he said something I didn't expect. Fine. That one word shifted the energy again, because it meant he wasn't going to fight me, at least not openly. One by one, the others stood up too. Some avoided eye contact. Some looked at me like they wanted to say something, but didn't. Only my youngest son stayed seated for a moment longer. He looked at me, really looked. I'm sorry, Dad, he said quietly. Not for the money, not for the documents, but for what happened on Christmas. I could hear it in his voice. I nodded once. Then show me, I said. He stood up and followed his brothers out. And just like that, they were gone again. The house fell silent. But this time, it didn't feel empty. It felt clear, like a weight had finally been lifted. For the first time in years, I wasn't responsible for fixing their lives anymore. They were. Over the next few weeks, things started to change. Not all at once, not perfectly, but noticeably. Some of my sons stopped calling completely. Maybe they were angry. Maybe they were embarrassed. Maybe they were waiting for me to change my mind. I didn't. Others started trying. They called to check on me. They asked how I was doing. They visited without asking for anything. Those visits were different, awkward at first, but real. And my youngest son? He showed up the most. Not with requests, not with expectations, just to spend time, to talk, to listen. One evening, he helped me fix a broken fence in the backyard, something I would have done alone before. We worked in silence for a while. Then he said quietly, I didn't realize how much you did for us until you stopped. I didn't answer right away, because that sentence meant more than any apology. Good, I said finally. Now you can learn to do it for yourself. And as the sun set that evening, I realized something important. This wasn't just about money. This wasn't just about control. This was about respect. And respect was something they were finally starting to understand. But the real test was still coming. Winter passed, and the silence that followed Christmas slowly turned into something else. Distance. Not the kind that breaks a family, but the kind that reveals what's really there. For the first few months, most of my sons kept their distance. Some out of pride, some out of anger, some because they didn't know how to face me anymore without asking for something. I didn't chase them. For the first time in my life, I let them live their lives without stepping in. And I lived mine. I focused on myself again. I woke up early, worked in the garden, handled small parts of the business when I felt like it, took long walks in the evenings. The house was still quiet, but it wasn't lonely anymore, because now the silence wasn't filled with expectations. It was filled with peace. About 2 months later, the first real test came. My third son called me late one evening. His voice was tense. Dad, I might lose my house. In the past, I would have reacted instantly. I would have written a check before he even finished explaining. But this time, I paused. What happened? I asked calmly. He explained everything: bad investment, poor planning, relying on quick returns that never came. I listened without interrupting. When he finished, there was silence on the line. He was waiting for me to save him, like I always had. I'm sorry you're going through that, I said. Another pause. Can you help me? He asked quietly. That question, that old, familiar question, used to control me, but not anymore. I can give you advice, I said. I can guide you through your options, But I will not fix this for you. Silence. Heavy silence. I could almost hear his disappointment through the phone. You're serious? He asked. Yes, I said. He didn't yell. He didn't argue. He just said, okay, and then he hung up. That moment was harder than I expected because every part of me wanted to protect him, to fix it, to take away his stress. But I knew that was the same mistake I had made his entire life. And that mistake is what led to Christmas night. A week later, he called again. Dad, I figured something out. His voice was different this time. Stronger, calmer. He told me he sold his second car, picked up extra work, refinanced his loan. He was still struggling, but he was solving it. Himself. I'm proud of you, I told him. And for the first time in years, I truly meant it. Not because I helped him, but because he helped himself. That moment started something. Slowly, one by one, my sons began to change. My fifth son started his own small business without asking me for investment money. My seventh son took a second job to pay off his debts. My second son, who used to call me only when he needed something, began calling just to ask how my day was. Real conversations, not requests. And my youngest son, he kept showing up every week, sometimes with groceries, sometimes with tools to fix something around the house, sometimes with nothing at all. Just time, just presence. One evening, we sat on the porch watching the sunset. He looked at me and said, I used to think you'd always be there to catch me. I nodded. I know. He continued, but I never realized how much that made me careless. I didn't respond right away, because what he said was the truth. Not just for him, for all of them. I didn't do you any favors by making life too easy, I said finally. He shook his head. You gave us everything, he said. We just didn't respect it. That word, again. Respect. The one thing money can't buy.